Welcome to Bedtime Tales, where every story is a gentle journey into peaceful dreams. Find a cozy place to relax, take a slow, comfortable breath, and let the worries of the day quietly drift away. Tonight, we'll travel to a world of quiet villages, kind hearts, and timeless adventures where every page turns a little slower and every ending brings peace. So dim the lights, close your eyes if you'd like, and let your imagination lead the way. This is Bedtime Tales. On the quietest night of the harvest season, an old farmer noticed something unusual in his field. Every evening, just as the moon rose over the hills, one corner of the wheat glowed with a soft silver light. The villagers wondered if it was magic, but the farmer simply smiled and said, "Perhaps the earth is telling us a story." In a small countryside village surrounded by rolling green hills, there lived a farmer named Elias. He was known throughout the village for his calm nature, his gentle smile, and the way he spoke kindly to every animal and person he met. Elias owned a modest farm at the edge of the village. His fields were filled with golden wheat, rows of vegetables, and a small orchard where apples ripened in the warm autumn sun. Every morning, before the rooster crowed, Elias would rise from his bed, put on his old straw hat, and walk slowly through his land. He would greet the animals as if they were old friends. "Good morning, Daisy," he would say to his cow. "Good morning, little hens," he would whisper as he scattered grain for the chickens. The animals seemed to understand his gentle voice, and they followed him peacefully as he worked. One evening, after a long day of harvesting wheat, Elias sat beside the old oak tree near the edge of his field. The sun had disappeared behind the hills, and the sky was painted with shades of pink, orange, and deep blue. A cool breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and ripe grain. As the moon rose above the horizon, Elias noticed something unusual. In the far corner of the wheat field, a soft silver glow appeared among the stalks. It was not bright like a lantern, nor flickering like fireflies. It was steady and peaceful, like moonlight resting gently on water. Elias stood up and walked toward the glow. The wheat rustled softly around him, and the night insects sang their quiet songs. When he reached the glowing corner, he found nothing strange or magical there. The wheat simply looked healthier than the rest of the field, taller and fuller, as if it had been especially blessed by the earth. The next morning, Elias mentioned the glow to his neighbors at the village market. "A glowing field?" one man asked with wide eyes. "That sounds like magic." "Perhaps a treasure is buried there," another villager suggested. But Elias only chuckled softly. "I think it is simply the moon shining on a part of the field that has been well cared for." Still, the villagers were curious. That evening, several of them walked to Elias's farm to see the glow for themselves. As the moon rose, the silver light appeared once again in the same corner of the field. The villagers whispered among themselves. "It is beautiful," said a young girl named Clara. "It feels peaceful," said an elderly woman. Elias nodded. "The earth responds to care," he explained. "This corner of the field was once dry and difficult to grow. For many seasons, I carried water here by hand. I added compost, loosened the soil, and planted cover crops to restore its strength. The glow you see is simply the moonlight reflecting on healthy wheat." The villagers listened carefully. They had expected a mysterious answer, but Elias's explanation felt even more meaningful. "So the secret is hard work?" Clara asked. "Not only hard work," Elias replied. "The secret is patience. The earth does not change overnight. It changes little by little when we care for it consistently." The villagers began to visit Elias more often, asking for advice about their own gardens and fields. Elias taught them how to compost kitchen scraps, how to rotate crops, and how to water plants deeply rather than too often. He explained that healthy soil was like a strong foundation for a home. Weeks passed, and the village slowly changed. Gardens became greener, vegetables grew larger, and the fields produced better harvests. The villagers worked together, sharing tools, seeds, and knowledge. They no longer saw farming as a lonely task but as a way to care for both the land and one another. One particularly warm evening, after the harvest was complete, the villagers gathered in Elias's field for a small celebration. They brought baskets of bread, fresh fruit, roasted vegetables, and warm soup. Children ran through the grass while the adults sat beneath the stars, enjoying the cool night air. As the moon rose, the familiar silver glow appeared once more in the corner of the field. But this time, the villagers did not whisper about magic or treasure. Instead, they smiled quietly, understanding what the glow represented. Clara sat beside Elias and looked out over the field. "The glow is still beautiful," she said. "Yes," Elias replied softly. "Beauty often comes from simple things: patience, care, and gratitude." The villagers fell silent for a moment, listening to the gentle rustle of wheat in the breeze. The night felt calm and safe, wrapped in the silver light of the moon. Elias looked around at his neighbors and friends. "The earth has taught us something important," he said. "When we care for the land cares for us. And when we care for one another, our village becomes stronger and more peaceful." The villagers nodded, feeling the truth of his words. They realized that the glowing field was not a mystery to be solved but a reminder of the quiet rewards that come from steady effort and kindness. As the celebration came to an end, the villagers walked home beneath the moonlit sky. Elias remained in the field for a few moments longer, breathing in the scent of wheat and fresh earth. He felt grateful for the land, for the harvest, and for the community that had grown closer together. Before returning to his farmhouse, Elias turned once more toward the glowing corner of the field. "Thank you," he whispered to the earth. The breeze answered with a soft rustle through the wheat, and the silver glow shimmered gently under the moon. And from that night on, whenever the villagers saw the moonlight resting on the healthy wheat, they remembered Elias's lesson. The greatest magic is often found in patience, care, and the quiet work of tending what we love. And so, under the calm moonlit sky, the village slept peacefully, knowing that the earth, like the heart, flourishes when it is cared for with patience and kindness. Good night, and may your dreams be as gentle as the silver glow upon the farmer's field. Every night at exactly 11 o'clock, a mysterious light appeared on the edge of the sea. No one in the little coastal town of Willow Bay knew where it came from, but the old lighthouse keeper believed it was guiding lost travelers home. The waves rolled gently against the rocky shore as the town of Willow Bay settled into sleep. Windows glowed softly with warm candlelight, and fishing boats bobbed quietly in the harbor. At the very end of the pier stood the old lighthouse, tall and white against the dark blue sky. Inside lived Mr. Elias, the lighthouse keeper. He was a quiet man with silver hair, kind eyes, and a calm voice that made people feel safe. Every evening, just before sunset, Mr. Elias climbed the spiral staircase to light the great lantern at the top of the tower. He polished the glass carefully, checked the flame, and watched the beam sweep across the sea. The townspeople often asked him why he took such care with the lighthouse. "Because," he would say with a gentle smile, "every light matters to someone who is trying to find their way home." One autumn evening, a young girl named Clara visited the lighthouse. She carried a basket of fresh bread from her mother's bakery. "My mother said you might like this," Clara said shyly. Mr. Elias thanked her and invited her inside. The lighthouse smelled of salt, warm oil, and old wood. Clara looked around with wide eyes. "Do you ever get lonely up here?" she asked. Mr. Elias chuckled softly. Not really. The sea keeps me company, and every night I wait for a very special light. Clara tilted her head. A special light? Mr. Elias nodded and pointed toward the horizon. At exactly 11 o'clock, a small light appears near the edge of the sea. It is not from a ship, and it is not from another lighthouse. I have watched it for many years. Where does it come from? Clara whispered. That, Mr. Elias said, is the mystery. Clara decided to stay until 11 o'clock. She sat beside the window while Mr. Elias tended to the lantern. The room grew quiet except for the steady sound of the waves below. As the clock neared 11, the wind softened. The sea became calm, almost like a sheet of dark glass. Clara held her breath. Then she saw it. Far out on the water, a tiny golden light appeared. It flickered gently, as if floating just above the waves. There it is, Mr. Elias said softly. Clara watched in amazement. It's beautiful. The light moved slowly across the sea, not toward the lighthouse, but along the shoreline. A few moments later, the faint outline of a small fishing boat emerged from the darkness. The boat had been struggling to find the harbor entrance. Guided by the mysterious light and the beam of the lighthouse, it turned safely toward the dock. When the fishermen reached shore, they thanked Mr. Elias for keeping the lighthouse burning so brightly. But Clara looked back at the sea. The golden light had already faded into the night. Did they see the mysterious light too? She asked. Mr. Elias smiled. Perhaps. Or perhaps they simply felt that they were being guided. The next night, Clara returned. Again, at 11 o'clock, the golden light appeared. This time, it led a traveler walking along the foggy shoreline back toward the town. Night after night, the same thing happened. The light appeared whenever someone was lost, uncertain, or searching for home. One evening, Clara asked the question that had been resting in her heart. Do you think the light is magic? Mr. Elias was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the sea, where the moon cast a silver path across the water. Maybe, he said. But I believe the light is a reminder. When people are frightened or far from home, even the smallest light can give them hope. Clara thought about this as she walked back through the sleeping town. She noticed the warm glow of windows, the lanterns beside doorways, and the stars shining above the rooftops. Each light seemed to say the same thing: you are not alone. As the weeks passed, Clara began helping Mr. Elias at the lighthouse. She polished the brass railings, carried oil for the lantern, and listened to his stories about storms, sailors, and quiet nights at sea. One winter evening, a thick fog rolled over Willow Bay. The harbor disappeared behind a curtain of white mist, and the sound of a distant boat horn echoed across the water. Mr. Elias and Clara hurried to the top of the lighthouse. The great lantern shone brightly, but the fog made it difficult to see far into the sea. At exactly 11 o'clock, the mysterious golden light appeared once more. It glowed softly through the fog, moving steadily toward the harbor entrance. There! Clara cried. It's showing the way. A small fishing boat emerged from the mist, following the light. Slowly and carefully, it made its way into the harbor and reached the dock safely. The fishermen climbed ashore, grateful and relieved. "If it weren't for the lighthouse," one of them said, "we might have drifted out to sea all night." Mr. Elias looked at Clara, and Clara looked back at the fading golden light. That night, as they descended the spiral staircase, Clara asked, "Will the light always come back?" Mr. Elias placed a gentle hand on the railing. "I believe it will come whenever someone needs it most." Years later, Clara would remember those evenings at the lighthouse whenever life felt uncertain. She would remember the quiet sea, the sweeping lantern beam, and the tiny golden light that appeared in the darkness. And she would remember Mr. Elias's words, "Every light matters to someone who is trying to find their way home." From then on, Clara made it her own habit to be a small light for others. She greeted lonely neighbors, helped travelers find their way, and left a lantern glowing in her window on stormy nights. Because she had learned the secret of the lighthouse. The brightest lights are not always the largest ones. Sometimes, the smallest light is enough to guide someone safely home. And so, beneath the calm stars of Willow Bay, the lighthouse continued to shine. The waves whispered against the shore, the lantern beam swept across the sea, and somewhere in the darkness, a tiny golden light flickered softly, reminding every traveler that home was never too far away. Before returning to his farmhouse, Elias turned once more toward the glowing corner of the field. "Thank you," he whispered to the earth. The breeze answered with a soft rustle through the wheat, and the silver glow shimmered gently under the moon. And from that night on, whenever the villagers saw the moonlight resting on the healthy wheat, they remembered Elias's lesson. The greatest magic is often found in patience, care, and the quiet work of tending what we love. And so, under the calm moonlit sky, the village slept peacefully, knowing that the earth, like the heart, flourishes when it is cared for with patience and kindness. Good night, and may your dreams be as gentle as the silver glow upon the farmer's field. Leaves drifted slowly from the trees as if dancing instead of falling. Even the breeze moved softly, almost like it was humming a lullaby. An elderly woman appeared beside a stone fountain. She smiled warmly. "Welcome. I've been waiting for someone patient enough to find this place." Oliver looked around in amazement. "What is this garden?" The woman answered gently, "This is the garden where time sleeps. Here, nothing rushes. Flowers bloom when they are ready. Trees grow without fear. And every visitor remembers how peaceful life can truly be." Oliver returned every evening after finishing his farm work. He never picked the flowers. He never broke a branch. Instead, he watered thirsty plants, repaired little stone paths, and cleaned fallen leaves. Weeks passed. The mysterious garden slowly became even more beautiful. One evening, the old woman handed Oliver a tiny seed. "This is not an ordinary seed. It grows only where kindness is planted first." Oliver carefully carried it home. Instead of keeping it for himself, he planted it in the middle of the village square where everyone could enjoy it. Every morning the villagers gathered around the tiny sprout. Children watered it. Farmers protected it from strong winds. Grandmothers sang gentle songs nearby. Little by little, the seed became a magnificent tree unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Its leaves shimmered silver under the moon. Its blossoms smelled like fresh honey. Birds built nests in its branches. Travelers often rested beneath its cool shade. People who sat beneath the tree noticed something wonderful. Their worries felt smaller. Their breathing slowed. Their hearts became peaceful. Soon, neighboring villages began visiting simply to spend quiet afternoons beneath the magical tree. Yet Oliver never claimed it was his achievement. Whenever people thanked him, he smiled. The tree grew because everyone cared for it together. Years passed peacefully. Oliver grew older. The mysterious garden behind the forest slowly disappeared once again beneath climbing ivy. No one else ever found its hidden gate. Some believed it had only been a dream. Others believed it had returned to sleep. But every full moon, when silver light covered the great village tree, a soft breeze carried the sweet scent of distant flowers. Oliver would close his eyes and smile. He knew the secret garden was still there, waiting patiently for another kind soul who believed that beautiful things never needed to hurry. And so the village slept peacefully beneath the gentle branches of the silver tree, while somewhere beyond the quiet forest, the garden where time sleeps continued blooming, slowly, peacefully, forever. Good night, sleep well, and may your dreams bloom as gently as flowers in a garden where time itself rests.
Every night, after the last sheep had settled beneath the quiet hills, a young shepherd noticed something strange. One star seemed to move slowly across the sky, not like the others, but as if it were gently leading someone toward a forgotten secret. Most people never noticed it, but one peaceful autumn evening, he decided to follow it. Long ago, in a quiet mountain valley, there lived a young shepherd named Samuel. His family had cared for sheep for generations, and every day followed the same gentle rhythm. At sunrise, Samuel led his flock across green meadows. By afternoon, they rested beside cool streams, and as evening arrived, they climbed a small hill where the sheep could safely spend the night. Samuel loved the silence of the countryside. He knew every winding path, every old oak tree, and every rocky hillside. He greeted birds each morning and thanked the land for every peaceful day. When darkness covered the valley, Samuel always looked toward the stars before returning home. One evening, while counting his sheep beneath the clear autumn sky, he noticed a bright golden star moving ever so slowly above the distant mountains. It wasn't falling. It wasn't flashing. It simply drifted gently across the sky. The same thing happened the next night. And the night after that. Curious but unafraid, Samuel packed a small lantern, a loaf of fresh bread, and a warm wool blanket. The following evening, after safely settling his sheep, he quietly followed the direction of the wandering star. The journey led him through peaceful forests where owls watched from ancient branches. He crossed small wooden bridges over quiet streams that reflected thousands of tiny stars. The night air smelled of pine trees and fresh earth. Hours later, Samuel reached a hidden valley he had never seen before. The wandering star stopped directly above an enormous tree unlike any he had ever imagined. Its branches stretched wide like welcoming arms. Its leaves shimmered softly with silver and gold, as though every leaf had collected a little piece of starlight. At the base of the tree sat an old shepherd wrapped in a thick wool cloak. His white beard reached almost to his chest, and his eyes sparkled with kindness. "You've finally arrived," the old man said with a gentle smile. Samuel looked surprised. "Were you expecting me?" The old shepherd nodded. The stars always guide those who listen with quiet hearts. They sat together beneath the glowing tree. The old shepherd poured warm herbal tea into 2 wooden cups. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Only the gentle breeze moved through the glowing leaves. Finally, Samuel asked, "Why did the star lead me here?" The old shepherd smiled. "Because the world moves too quickly. People rush through their days. They forget to watch sunsets. They forget to hear birds singing. They forget that peace is something we choose." Samuel listened quietly. The old shepherd continued, "Every night this star searches for someone who still notices simple beauty. You noticed." Before sunrise, the old shepherd handed Samuel a small wooden shepherd's whistle carved with tiny stars. "Whenever life feels hurried," he said softly, "blow this whistle only once. It won't stop time, but it will remind your heart to slow down." Samuel thanked him warmly. When he looked up again, the old shepherd had quietly disappeared. Only the great silver tree remained beneath the fading stars. Samuel returned home before sunrise. Life continued much as before. He cared for his sheep. He greeted every sunrise. He smiled at strangers. But whenever the world felt noisy or rushed, he held the little wooden whistle in his hand. He remembered the quiet valley. He remembered the silver tree. And most of all, he remembered that peaceful hearts always find the right path. Years passed. Samuel became the village's oldest shepherd. Children often asked him why he always seemed so calm. Its leaves shimmered softly with silver and gold, as though every leaf had collected a little piece of starlight. At the base of the tree sat an old shepherd wrapped in a thick wool cloak. His white beard reached almost to his chest, and his eyes sparkled with kindness. "You've finally arrived," the old man said with a gentle smile. Samuel looked surprised. "Were you expecting me?" The old shepherd nodded. The stars always guide those who listen with quiet hearts. They sat together beneath the glowing tree. The old shepherd poured warm herbal tea into 2 wooden cups. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Only the gentle breeze moved through the glowing leaves. Finally, Samuel asked, "Why did the star lead me here?" The old shepherd smiled. "Because the world moves too quickly. People rush through their days. They forget to watch sunsets. They forget to hear birds singing. They forget that peace is something we choose." Samuel listened quietly. The old shepherd continued, "Every night this star searches for someone who still notices simple beauty. You noticed." Before sunrise, the old shepherd handed Samuel a small wooden shepherd's whistle carved with tiny stars. "Whenever life feels hurried," he said softly, "blow this whistle only once. It won't stop time, but it will remind your heart to slow down." Samuel thanked him warmly. When he looked up again, the old shepherd had quietly disappeared. Only the great silver tree remained beneath the fading stars. Samuel returned home before sunrise. Life continued much as before. He cared for his sheep. He greeted every sunrise. He smiled at strangers. But whenever the world felt noisy or rushed, he held the little wooden whistle in his hand. He remembered the quiet valley. He remembered the silver tree. And most of all, he remembered that peaceful hearts always find the right path. Years passed. Samuel became the village's oldest shepherd. Children often asked him why he always seemed so calm. He would simply smile toward the evening sky. "Because," he would say, "I once followed a single star instead of chasing the whole sky." On clear autumn nights, villagers sometimes noticed one lonely golden star slowly crossing the heavens. Some thought it was only their imagination. Others believed it was guiding another kind traveler toward the hidden valley. And somewhere beneath that ancient silver tree, where the mountains kissed the stars, the quiet breeze still whispered the same gentle reminder. "Slow down. Look up, and never forget that the greatest journeys begin with peaceful hearts. The valley grew quiet. The sheep slept safely beneath the moon. The stars continued their gentle dance across the endless sky. And as the soft night wrapped the world in peaceful silence, it was finally time to rest. Good night, sleep well, and may your dreams follow the brightest star to a place where every heart finds peace.
9 o'clock on the last Sunday of October, an old steam train appeared at an abandoned station deep in the countryside. There was no schedule. No conductor ever announced its arrival, and no one knew where it came from. But the villagers believed only people with truly kind hearts could hear its whistle. One quiet evening, a young station caretaker decided to wait. Long ago, in a peaceful farming valley surrounded by golden fields and gentle forests, there lived a young man named Thomas. He cared for an old railway station that had not welcomed a passenger train for many years. Every morning, Thomas swept the wooden platform, polished the rusty station clock, watered the flowers growing beside the tracks, and greeted every traveler who happened to pass by. Most people wondered why he worked so hard for a station that seemed forgotten. Thomas would simply smile. Every place deserves to be cared for. As the seasons passed, the station became one of the prettiest places in the valley. Colorful flowers bloomed beside the rails, birds nested beneath the roof, and ivy climbed the old brick walls. One chilly autumn evening, an elderly woman stopped at the station carrying a small suitcase. She smiled kindly and asked, "Do you know about the midnight train?" Thomas laughed softly. "I've heard the stories. They say it only comes for kind people." The woman nodded. "Stories often hide the truth." Before Thomas could ask another question, she quietly continued down the country road and disappeared into the evening mist. That night, Thomas stayed later than usual. The sky slowly filled with stars. The valley became wonderfully quiet. Then, far in the distance, he heard it. A soft steam whistle. Gentle, warm, almost like a lullaby floating through the hills. A few moments later, an old black steam locomotive appeared from the darkness. Its brass lanterns glowed with golden light. White steam curled into the cool night air.
Its leaves shimmered softly with silver and gold, as though every leaf had collected a little piece of starlight. At the base of the tree sat an old shepherd wrapped in a thick wool cloak. His white beard reached almost to his chest, and his eyes sparkled with kindness. "You've finally arrived," the old man said with a gentle smile. Samuel looked surprised. "Were you expecting me?" The old shepherd nodded. The stars always guide those who listen with quiet hearts. They sat together beneath the glowing tree. The old shepherd poured warm herbal tea into 2 wooden cups. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Only the gentle breeze moved through the glowing leaves. Finally, Samuel asked, "Why did the star lead me here?" The old shepherd smiled. "Because the world moves too quickly. People rush through their days. They forget to watch sunsets. They forget to hear birds singing. They forget that peace is something we choose." Samuel listened quietly. The old shepherd continued, "Every night this star searches for someone who still notices simple beauty. You noticed." Before sunrise, the old shepherd handed Samuel a small wooden shepherd's whistle carved with tiny stars. "Whenever life feels hurried," he said softly, "blow this whistle only once. It won't stop time, but it will remind your heart to slow down." Samuel thanked him warmly. When he looked up again, the old shepherd had quietly disappeared. Only the great silver tree remained beneath the fading stars. Samuel returned home before sunrise. Life continued much as before. He cared for his sheep. He greeted every sunrise. He smiled at strangers. But whenever the world felt noisy or rushed, he held the little wooden whistle in his hand. He remembered the quiet valley. He remembered the silver tree. And most of all, he remembered that peaceful hearts always find the right path. Years passed. Samuel became the village's oldest shepherd. Children often asked him why he always seemed so calm.
The polished wooden passenger cars shone beneath the moonlight. The train rolled silently into the station. An elderly conductor stepped onto the platform. His navy blue uniform looked perfectly pressed despite its age. He tipped his cap. "Good evening. We've been expecting you." Thomas looked around. "There are no passengers." The conductor smiled. "There soon will be." One by one, travelers quietly appeared from the mist. An old farmer carrying fresh bread. A little girl holding a tiny lantern. A nurse returning home after helping others. A carpenter with worn hands. A schoolteacher carrying books. Each greeted Thomas with a warm smile before boarding the train. The conductor explained, "This train visits those whose kindness has quietly changed someone else's life." Thomas watched in amazement. The passengers weren't famous. They weren't wealthy. They were simply good people. The conductor invited Thomas aboard. Inside, the train felt wonderfully cozy. Soft lamps glowed above polished wooden seats. Fresh apple pie and warm tea filled the air with comforting aromas. Outside the windows, forests, rivers, snowy mountains, golden farms, and peaceful villages slowly passed by. Yet Thomas realized something unusual. The train wasn't traveling through places. It was traveling through memories. Each passenger smiled while watching scenes from their lives. A farmer helping a neighbor during harvest. A child rescuing an injured bird. Friends sharing food during difficult winters. Families laughing together beside fireplaces. Thomas quietly watched his own memories appear. Planting flowers at the empty station. Helping tired travelers. Repairing broken benches. Smiling at lonely strangers. The conductor gently placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. Kindness is never forgotten. It becomes part of every journey. Hours seemed to pass peacefully, yet when the train returned to the station, the clock still showed only 9 o'clock. Not a single minute had passed. Before leaving, the conductor handed Thomas a small brass train whistle. When you hear someone losing hope, remind them that simple kindness always finds its way home. The train slowly disappeared into the moonlit mist. Only its gentle whistle echoed across the valley. Years passed. Thomas continued caring for the old station. Travelers always found flowers waiting. Fresh drinking water. Warm smiles. A place to rest. People said there was something wonderfully peaceful about the little station. They never knew why. But every autumn, at exactly 9 o'clock, some villagers claimed they heard a distant steam whistle drifting across the quiet countryside. Thomas would simply smile toward the stars. He never told anyone about the midnight train. Some stories were meant to remain gentle secrets. And somewhere beyond the quiet hills, the old steam train continued its endless journey, searching for the next kind heart waiting patiently beneath the stars. The station grew silent. The lanterns slowly dimmed. The crickets sang softly in the cool autumn air. The moon climbed higher into the peaceful night sky, and little by little, the entire valley drifted into a calm. In a quiet little village, everyone believed sunsets simply faded away. But an old clockmaker knew a wonderful secret. He believed every sunset was carefully saved somewhere, so the world would never run out of beautiful evenings. One curious apprentice decided to discover where they went. Long ago, nestled between rolling hills and peaceful meadows, stood a tiny village where time always seemed to move a little slower. In the center of the village lived an elderly clockmaker named Mr. Edwin. His small workshop was filled with hundreds of clocks. Grandfather clocks, pocket watches, tiny music boxes, old cuckoo clocks. Each ticked gently, creating the softest rhythm in the village. But there was one thing that made Mr. Edwin different from every other clockmaker. Every evening, just before sunset, he closed his workshop exactly 10 minutes early. He climbed the hill behind the village carrying an old leather notebook and a tiny brass telescope. The villagers often wondered why. Some thought he was watching the stars. Others believed he simply enjoyed the evening breeze. Only Mr. Edwin knew the truth. He wasn't watching the sunset. He was collecting it. One autumn afternoon, his young apprentice, Henry, quietly followed him. Hidden behind an old oak tree, Henry watched as Mr. Edwin carefully opened his notebook. The old clockmaker smiled at the glowing horizon. As the golden sun slowly disappeared behind the distant hills, he gently turned a tiny silver key hidden inside the notebook. To Henry's amazement, tiny ribbons of golden light floated through the evening air. They drifted into the notebook like glowing silk. When the last ray disappeared, the notebook quietly closed itself. Henry stepped forward. What just happened? Mr. Edwin smiled kindly. I collect today's sunset. Henry laughed. That's impossible. The old man simply replied. So is kindness. Until someone shows it. The next evening, Mr. Edwin invited Henry to join him. Together they watched another beautiful sunset. Orange melted into gold. Pink became lavender. The sky slowly filled with stars. As the final sunlight disappeared, Mr. Edwin explained, every sunset carries the peaceful moments people almost forgot. A father teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle. A farmer sharing apples with his neighbors. A lonely traveler welcomed into a warm home. A grandmother reading bedtime stories. These moments become part of every sunset. Henry looked across the valley. The world suddenly seemed quieter, kinder, more beautiful. Weeks passed. Every evening they climbed the same hill together. Every sunset looked different. Some painted the clouds bright crimson. Others covered the sky in soft purple and silver. Winter arrived. Snow quietly covered the village. Even then, the sunsets remained warm. One snowy evening Henry asked, "What happens when your notebook becomes full?" Mr. Edwin smiled. It never becomes full. Because every beautiful memory makes room for another. Years passed peacefully. Henry became a skilled clockmaker himself. He learned to repair every clock inside the workshop. But his favorite part of every day remained the evening walk to the hill. Eventually, Mr. Edwin grew very old. One calm spring evening, he handed Henry the leather notebook. "It's your turn now." Henry carefully opened it. Inside were thousands of tiny glowing sunsets. Each shimmered softly like golden watercolor paintings. Each held the warmth of countless happy memories. Mr. Edwin quietly closed his eyes. The world will always need someone to remember its beautiful evenings. After that day, Henry continued the tradition. Every sunset, he climbed the hill. Every evening, another peaceful memory found its place inside the magical notebook. Travelers passing through the village often noticed something unusual. The sunsets there always seemed brighter, warmer, longer. No one knew why. Children simply called it the village where evenings smile. And high above the quiet hills, as another golden sunset slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, Henry gently turned the tiny silver key. Another beautiful day quietly found its forever home. The clocks continued their peaceful ticking. The birds settled into their nests. The first stars sparkled above the sleeping village. And somewhere inside the old leather notebook, thousands of gentle sunsets glowed together, waiting to brighten someone's dreams. On the shore of a quiet lake sat a tiny wooden boat tied to an old dock. By day, it never moved. No matter how strong the wind blew, no matter how high the waves became, but every full moon, when the whole village was asleep, the little boat quietly untied itself and sailed across the silver water. One night, a curious fisherman decided to follow it. Long ago, beside a peaceful lake surrounded by pine forests and gentle hills, there lived a young fisherman named Lucas. Unlike most fishermen, Lucas loved the quiet mornings more than the biggest catch. Before sunrise, he would sit on the dock with a warm cup of tea, listening to birds greet the day. The villagers often spoke about the little wooden boat tied to the oldest dock. It belonged to no one. It had no name painted on its side. And yet, every morning, it was always back in the same place. No one had ever seen who returned it. One crisp autumn evening, an elderly woman smiled at Lucas and whispered, "If you ever see the boat leave, don't be afraid. Just follow." Lucas thought she was telling an old village tale. But on the night of the full moon, he couldn't sleep. The lake shimmered like polished silver beneath the moonlight. Then he heard a soft creak. The little boat gently untied itself. Without a sail, without an oar, it drifted silently across the water. Lucas climbed into his own small fishing boat and followed at a respectful distance. The journey was peaceful. Mist floated above the lake. White swans glided across the still water. The moon reflected perfectly on the surface, making it seem as though the boats were sailing through the sky. After a while, the mysterious boat reached a tiny island hidden by willow trees. Lucas stepped ashore. To his surprise, the island was filled with glowing wildflowers instead of blow. Ancient oak trees. In the center of the island stood an old man with kind eyes, rested holding a small lantern. Foxes found the island of quiet dreams. Owls perched quietly on branches. Lucas looked around in amazement. "What is this place?" The old man replied, "Every night, this little boat brings peace to those who have forgotten how to rest." He explained that the island appeared only under the full moon. It was a place where tired hearts could slow down and remember the beauty of silence. Lucas spent the night helping the old man care for the island. He filled small bowls with fresh water for the birds. He gathered fallen branches to keep the paths clear. He watched the stars reflected in the calm lake. As dawn approached, the old man handed Lucas a tiny carved wooden paddle. "Whenever life feels too busy," he said gently, "hold this paddle and remember that even the smallest boat can lead you to great peace." When the first rays of sunlight touched the lake, the island slowly faded into the morning mist. Lucas found himself back at the old dock. The little wooden boat was tied exactly where it had always been. From that day on, Lucas never rushed through life. He still fished each morning. He still greeted every sunrise. But every full moon, he would sit quietly on the dock, smiling at the little boat. Sometimes, he thought he could hear laughter drifting across the water. Other times, he simply watched the moonlight dance on the lake. The villagers noticed that Lucas always seemed calm, no matter what challenges came his way. When they asked for his secret, he would simply say, "Some journeys don't take you farther away. They bring you closer to peace." Years passed. The little boat continued its silent moonlit voyages. Many believed it was only an old legend. But on clear nights, when the moon was bright and the lake was still, Some villagers claimed they saw a tiny boat gliding across the silver water with no one aboard. And perhaps it was still searching for another kind soul who needed a peaceful journey. The lake grew quiet. The stars sparkled above the sleeping forest. The little boat drifted gently beneath the moon, and the world rested peacefully until morning. Every morning before sunrise, while the village was still asleep, the smell of fresh bread drifted through the quiet streets. But something curious happened every single day. Before the first customer arrived, one warm loaf always disappeared from the bakery. No one ever saw who took it. Until one gentle winter morning, a young baker decided to find out. Long ago, in a peaceful mountain village surrounded by pine forests and flower-filled meadows, there lived a young baker named Benjamin. Benjamin loved waking before the sun. While the stars still shimmered overhead, he would light the old stone oven, knead fresh dough, and quietly hum cheerful little songs as the bakery filled with the comforting smell of warm bread. His bakery was small, but everyone in the village agreed it made the finest bread for miles around. Every morning, Benjamin baked 12 golden loaves. Yet by sunrise, only 11 remained. One loaf always disappeared. There were no footprints, no broken windows, no open doors. It simply vanished. The older villagers smiled whenever Benjamin mentioned it. Some mysteries, they would say, are meant to be followed. One snowy morning, Benjamin hid behind a wooden shelf before dawn. The bakery was completely silent. Only the crackling fire could be heard. Then, tap, 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 a tiny robin landed on the windowsill. It chirped 3 gentle notes. To Benjamin's surprise, the bakery door slowly creaked open by itself. The robin hopped inside. Moments later, dozens of colorful birds appeared. Bluebirds, cardinals, finches, sparrows, even a beautiful white dove. Instead of eating the bread, they carefully carried the warm loaf away together. Benjamin quietly followed them through the snow-covered forest. The birds flew to a hidden valley unlike anything he had ever seen. The valley glowed softly beneath the morning sky. Ancient oak trees stretched high above fields of winter flowers. Crystal streams sparkled between moss-covered stones. Hundreds of birds rested peacefully in the branches. In the center of the valley stood an elderly woman wearing a simple blue cloak. She smiled as Benjamin approached. "You've come with kindness instead of anger," she said. Benjamin looked at the birds sharing the loaf. "I thought someone was stealing my bread." The woman shook her head gently. "No, they've been sharing it." She explained that every winter, many small birds became too weak to search for food before sunrise. For generations, the village bakery had unknowingly provided the first meal of every morning. The birds never took more than one loaf, only enough to help the oldest, the smallest, and the weakest survive until spring. Benjamin smiled warmly. "Then tomorrow, I'll bake 13. The elderly woman laughed softly. The kindest people always find a way to give more than expected. From that day forward, Benjamin baked an extra loaf every morning. Sometimes two. The birds carried them away before the village awoke. As the seasons passed, something wonderful happened. The orchards produced sweeter fruit. The gardens bloomed brighter flowers. The forests echoed with more birdsong than ever before. The villagers noticed. "Our harvests have never been so beautiful." Benjamin simply smiled. He knew the birds had been quietly caring for the valley all along. Years passed peacefully. Benjamin became the oldest baker in the village. Children loved visiting his warm bakery before school. He taught them how to knead dough with gentle hands and generous hearts. Whenever a child asked why he always baked one extra loaf, Benjamin would point toward the forest and say, "Kindness is like fresh bread. The more you share, the warmer the world becomes." Even after Benjamin grew old, every morning before sunrise, one fresh loaf still disappeared from the bakery. The villagers never questioned it. They simply smiled. Some traditions were too beautiful to explain. And if you ever wake before dawn, if the world is very quiet, and you smell fresh bread drifting through the cool morning air, listen carefully. You might hear the gentle flutter of tiny wings carrying breakfast through the sleeping forest. The bakery grew quiet. The fire glowed softly inside the old stone oven. Outside, snowflakes drifted gently beneath the stars. The little birds settled into their warm nests, and the peaceful village slowly fell asleep, waiting for another beautiful morning to begin. Good night, and may your dreams be as warm as freshly baked bread shared with a kind heart.